Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Business Builder webinar. Hope you're all well. Today's subject is why should people buy from you? And we'll be going through that in great detail, probably for the next 30 to 45 minutes. For those of you who haven't attended before, I'm Mark Lawson, Managing Director of Business Vision Accountants based in Plymouth. And we specialise in helping small, medium-sized businesses grow their profits, cash flow, business value, and spend less time and have more fun doing that. So hopefully you're in that category and we'll get a lot out of today's presentation. Okay, so let's just look at an exercise before we go into the nitty-gritty of today. It's an exercise that you'll do after the webinar because it will take some time, but you might want to take notes down about broadly what to do, although it should be fairly clear. First exercise I would suggest is go to Google and just look up 3 local hairdressers. It doesn't have to be hairdressers. I'm just looking for businesses that have a lot of competition, because most of today's presentation is going to be about how to move you away from having to compete with other people who do what you do. And I'm guessing most of you will have a large number of people who are able to compete and take business away from you. So look up 3 local hairdressers and then do the same for, let's say, 3 local wedding photographers. So businesses that would have a trade but would have potentially loads and loads of other people in the locality who could do the same job. And finally, and probably most importantly for you, look up on Google your 3 top competitors. So whoever you know you're up against when you're dealing with customers, who you lose customers to, who you gain them from, who go somewhere else when you're pricing them out. Just those top 3. And with all of those groups of 3, as you're going through their website, I want you to just basically look and ask some questions of what you see. And that's basically, does it get your blood flowing? Do you really look at it and go, wow, that's just fantastic? Or is it all just much of a muchness? Chances are it will be much of a muchness. You'll see lots of generic phrases on there. You'll see words like friendly team, which is fine. We do need friendly teams, excellent customer service, nothing wrong with that. It will probably say when the business was established, a little bit about the people and the owner. It will possibly say their aim is to do something. There might even be a mini mission statement. And there probably will be lots of we's, us's and ours rather than you, yours, etc. And it's always a good exercise with websites to actually count those, because the ratio of that should be 2 customer-facing words to every internal-facing word. But the reality is that even though those phrases reflect things that should be good in a business, all the websites will say pretty much similar stuff. There isn't going to be anything there that jumps out. They're all going to have friendly teams. They're all going to promise excellent customer service. And if you were looking to use one of those suppliers, if you were looking to get your hair done or looking for a wedding to be photographed, chances are that that wouldn't give you a great idea of who to go to. It's very hard to tell from that sort of information who's going to be the best. And today our aim is to very much move you away from that blandness and being linked in with all your competitors doing much of a muchness, and go way beyond that. So as a final exercise, if you're feeling brave, I would then recommend that you look up your own website, assuming you have one on Google, and do exactly the same exercise, or because you're partisan, maybe even get somebody else to do it for you, instruct them on what they're looking for, and just see if they come back and give you an honest answer as to whether your website does excite them as a potential customer, whether they think you are head and shoulders above other people who do what you do, or whether actually it's still nice, very glossy websites. Most websites these days are good looking, but unfortunately good looking isn't something that customers are particularly looking for in deciding whether they're going to work with you. So as a final exercise, just look up on Google, get you and your team to just see how you rate as an exciting business doing what you're doing, and whether you're promising anything or doing anything out of the ordinary. From a customer's point of view, you may think it's exceptional, but it has to be exceptional from the customer's point of view. So once we've done that, we then have a bit of background about why I think it's essential for small businesses to start looking at differentiating, how to make your business look better than the competition. And we'll go through in a minute why that's useful to have, although it probably is fairly intuitive that that is essential. So I want to go through a little what-if exercise, and you're going to have to suspend disbelief slightly here, because it's a fictional and made-up story, but it does give a point. So I want you to imagine that you're away from business in a foreign town, and you're going to do some business work the next day. You've got a bit of spare time on your hands, and you decide that you desperately need a haircut. And you wander out from your hotel and you find a street, and lo and behold, the only things on that street are hairdressers, which is brilliant because that's exactly what you're looking for. And there are 8 hairdressers on that street, 4 on each side, and they all potentially do what you want. And you wander down, and as you look through the windows, you're effectively seeing very, very similar stuff. You're seeing very nicely designed interiors, so they'll be very modern and very well designed. They'll look sleek and swish usually. They'll all say the same things on the window. They'll advertise a bit of stock. There'll be a nice big neat shelf with all the stock piled up. There'll be a sign possibly in the window saying walk-ins welcome, and you pop your head in some of the doors of those hairdressers, and there's 2 or 3 stylists just not being busy. They're sat around the counter in reception just yattering to each other, pay you no great attention when you pop your head round and you decide to effectively leave again. There's a little half-empty coffee jug in the corner bubbling away, and then you get to the end of that street, and the last one is different. And some of the things that are different, and I won't go through and list all the potentials, that's something we'll go through in the course of this afternoon, but it says on the window, "We love surprise guests. Please pop in, we'll be able to deal with you within minutes." When you go in, the receptionist is on her own and is immediately a test for you and your hair and what exactly you're looking for from a hairdresser. Again, without being sexist, I'm imagining that's going to appeal slightly more to the ladies than the men, but you never know. They also have a menu that has a choice of 10 specialist Italian coffees there, but they also do a selection of teas and chocolate. They explain that they have a choice of music, your choice of music that they can put on a Walkman, so that when you're waiting and having maybe your hair colouring developed and you're having to sit to one side, that you can listen to music that you like on a Walkman without being disturbed by anybody else. And they also explain that if there are any issues following the haircut and the consultation that day, that they have a emergency number where if you've got any issues you can ring up and pop back in, and it will immediately be sorted out. And if that's in the evening or outside working hours, the person answering that number will be able to go in and immediately reopen that salon for you and deal with the issue. Now, I've obviously made that slightly extreme, although hopefully by the end of this session you'll realise that that's not as extreme as it might sound at this stage. But clearly you can get from that when you're looking for a haircut and wandering down that street with a large choice of potential people to do the work, you're going to gravitate in most cases to the one I've described at the end, because they stand, ignore the pun, head and shoulders above all the other competition in that street. And if you imagine 80 potential customers walking down that street all in need of a haircut, if all 8 hairdressers were the same, then it's probably likely that equal numbers will go in each hairdresser, probably 10 in each, simply because of queue sizes, etc. There won't be any other reason to go in any one in preference to the other. But if the last hairdresser does what we've just explained and a lot more, there's a good chance that well over half the potential customers may choose that hairdresser in preference to the others. I know some people would say, but won't it depend on the prices displayed? And for some of those 80 customers walking down that street, that's certainly true. Some may not have much money, and therefore the cheapest one will be the one they go in, even if it doesn't give them really what they want. They have a budget. So some of them will gravitate to lesser businesses because of price, but far less than you would imagine. So I would think if 80 potential customers walk down that street, then a good half could probably end up in that last salon. And clearly that's going to be something that's really rewarding for that salon, and we can go through ways that they can exploit that later. Today's mainly going to be about how you can get into that position and a process that you need to do to get there. So it's a 7-step process, and I'll go through all the 7 steps. It's fair to say that a bit of work's required for this. It's not obviously going to be something you can just click your fingers and this will all be in place tomorrow, but it is also something that can be done gradually and will get good immediate results. So you don't have to go through the whole process in great detail. Doing bits of it and doing some of it in more detail than other bits will have an immediate effect, but I would recommend that you go through all 7 steps in great detail over a period of time. And the businesses that we've advised and who have done that do have very great success in most cases, and most businesses will have competition. If you're a unique business, then clearly you don't need to differentiate, because being unique is your differentiation. Okay, so let's look at, before we start the 7 processes, let's just look at a couple of benefits you're going to get from differentiating. They're going to be fairly obvious, but it's worth restating because these are going to be big benefits. These aren't just going to happen to a small degree once you get all this working for you. The first one is clearly you're going to get more customers. It's not always a great thing having more customers, because more customers means more work, but we'll come on to that in a minute. But you'll get more customers because you're going to look far better than all your competition. Those customers are more likely to be of the type you want. So if we go back to the hairdressing example, the tyre kickers, the people who just want a cheap haircut, are going to knock you down on price and still moan, won't end up in the last salon because that clearly isn't going to appeal to them particularly, and probably the prices aren't going to appeal either. So that you're going to get more customers of the type you want. It also means if you're in a business where you get leads from websites or from referrals or wherever, and you have to go through a conversion process, the whole conversion process is going to be easier because your salespeople have all these great differentiated ideas that they can tell the customer about, and it almost sells itself. And finally, and not leastly, it allows the business to then charge higher prices. So when I said that you get more customers, that's certainly true, but what I then suspect you ought to do is to ratchet up prices because of your differentiation, and that will gradually lower the customer numbers back down, which means you'll have the same or less amount of work to do, but you'll still be making more profit because of higher prices. And pricing is a whole subject to itself, and we're going to be doing a live seminar in a month's time on that, which I'll tell you about at the end, which I strongly recommend you get to. So those are the sort of benefits which I'm guessing you can work out yourself. And the idea is that you won't just be slightly better, but that you will be head and shoulders, you'll stand way above all the local competition in the way that the Carlsberg ads used to do. I don't know if you can read that on your screens, but it basically says if Carlsberg did litter, it would probably be the best litter in the world. So that's where we want to get you to, and that's where the 7-step program is going to start guiding you towards. Okay, so just getting on to the 7 steps in a second, but before we do that, just understand a few background pointers, and that's understanding what customers want, because a lot of businesses, and you'll see this from the websites that you've going to review, a lot of the websites concentrate on what the business does as opposed to what customers want that business to do for them. So broadly, customers want 3 things. They want to avoid pain, they want to gain some sort of benefit, and or they want to save time. So those 3 things, although they cover a multitude of different subsections, broadly that's what they want. And those areas in terms of what the customer wants can fall under different categories, but again, broadly, I would suggest that they might be financial pain, i.e. penalties or financial gain, physical or psychological stroke emotional needs. So a little list of what that might include would be results. So certainly as an accountant doing profit growth advice, there will be absolutely no reason at all if businesses paid for profit growth advice and then didn't see an increase in profit. So they certainly want to see results. They may want to see some other solution. So if you're advertising stain cleaner, then they'd obviously want to see that stain disappeared, or whatever. If it's a medical solution, they'd want to see that medical ailment disappear. They might want value. They might want some sort of value. Certainly a large number of customer wants, especially in the retail sector, is to do with prestige, whether it be ego or one-upmanship or whatever. Prestige is there. So in other words, what customers are really looking for is what they're left with when you finish doing what you do, what we call afters. And there's a great book on afters written by a guy called Andy Bounds. So if you look up Andy Bounds on Amazon, I think he's got 2 or 3 books. They're all very, very good in going through how you deliver afters and how you understand what afters are. But we need to be aware that when we talk with customers through our website or our marketing, that what they really want is not necessarily to know what we do, but what we can get them. Customers aren't particularly interested in how the medication works or what ingredients are included. They just want to know whether it's going to work and what they're going to be left with afterwards. So let's go through in some detail the 7 steps. And as we go through those, I strongly recommend you take notes about actions that you need. I'm quite happy to let people have the slides to supplement the notes. If you want to, at the end, I'll give you some email addresses. Just email us and say slide notes, then we'll gladly send those to you as well. But I'll also write down some notes about what actions you're going to take as a result of today's webinar. So step 1. And this involves running a brainstorming session. Excuse me. And when we talk about brainstorming, I certainly would include in that session your team, but I'd also include, potentially, given the nature of what we're doing, customers and other third parties, because who best to tell you things about your business than potential customers or customers who've already used you, but certainly the team, not just you on your own unless you're a one-man band. So brainstorming session, and what you want to identify in that session is the things that customers really hate. And for most businesses, that's not going to be difficult to do. If it is, then again, you can ask your existing customers and potential customers as well. So you list out everything they hate, everything that they find inconvenient and annoying, the things that gets on their nerves and makes it difficult for them to do business with you. It might be that there's no easy way to find out the customer service number. There's no easy way for them to pay you. There's no easy way for them to pay you in different ways. So all the things that you might come across, ranging from obviously the various serious things that they might hate down to the just little niggles and annoyances, because all of those can be addressed. So you list all those out in order, and then just keep a note of that. And once you've got that list, the aim is to then brainstorm what I call pain relievers. So what are you going to do within your products or services and your systems to basically relieve and get rid of those pains for the customers and remove any key frustrations that they may have with dealing, not with you specifically, but with your type of business. So for myself, with accountants, those key frustrations might be how long it takes to get the accounts or the tax returns out. It might be that they can never get hold of anybody. It might be that they leave messages and nobody gets back to them. It might be they come into a meeting and have to wait half an hour to be seen. It might be that they never get given any proactive advice on how to do things like save tax and make money. So I could list hundreds of key frustrations with accountants because we know what they are, and probably you do as well. So you list all those out and then work out how you're going to create pain relievers to solve them. And at this stage, I wouldn't get too bogged down in worrying about how difficult it's going to be to relieve it. You basically imagine you've got a magic wand and you can do anything. The fact that initially you might think, well, that's going to cost us 20 grand to do that, so we'll ignore that. I wouldn't ignore them at this stage. You can always do so later, but you need to go through the rest of the webinar to see why everything needs to be on the table. And some of these things may appear very difficult to get rid of, which is why you do need to spend a bit of time. And one great way of finding out how to relieve stuff in your industry is to look at other industries to see what they're doing. They've often come across great ideas that you might be able to apply in your business. And again, if doing this exercise and the other exercises you get stuck, then at the end I'll give you some ways where you might be able to get some help. Next step is really the same as step one, but on a different area. So you're going to run another brainstorming session to identify what customers really want. So what they want you to do, what they want to be left with after you've done what it is you do. What things do they find awesome? What makes them particularly grateful, and what makes it easy for them to do business with you and to use the services or products that you're supplying? So very similar to step one, but just looking at the positive side this time, not the negative. And again, your job there is to do a similar thing, which is with your team to design some gain creators. How are we going to create more of those types of gains and benefits that really wow and give the customer what they want? And sometimes even things that they don't even know they want or haven't even thought you could possibly do. So increasingly there are businesses that do one thing but become great specialists in other areas. So a great example I'll quote later on is a dentist in Australia called Paddy Lund, and he had a bit of a mental breakdown in his dental practice. He felt overworked and underloved, and one day he just hired a chainsaw, went back to his dental surgery and effectively razed it to the ground. And once he'd sort of come to his senses, he decided to reinvent the business. But that new business now includes a bakery on site where they bake dental scones that are good for your teeth and customers can sample. It has a huge coffee machine, far beyond even some of the key coffee shops, and they will create tea and have a tea ceremony or coffee. So they've done things that have absolutely nothing to do with their core service, but they're certainly going to wow and delight potential customers and get talked about, because I'm talking about an Australian dentist in the UK. Step three is then to basically identify the order in which to implement the ideas from steps 1 and 2. And there might be a temptation to order that in terms of ease and cost. So you might go for the easy ideas because they can be done quickly. You might go for the cheap ideas, which is fine as long as you get through all the ideas eventually. But I would suggest that it might be a better idea to start with those that represent the biggest pains to customers and those that represent the biggest gains, and work on those. They often are the hardest to get round, but because they're so big, they would represent the biggest wins for you, if not the quickest wins. So they should be near the top, I would suggest. And what you then do is create what I call performance or service standards based on those ideas. So they will be things that you do within your business that help those gains or remove those pains, and you would have a list of what the business does as a performance standard that you can then tell the customer about, but also service standards. So if, let's say, the hairdresser decides that one of the pains for customers might be waiting time, that a customer turns up on time and then ends up sitting for 20 minutes in the salon because the haircut before had overrun, they might decide that one of the things they could do is to basically reduce the waiting time, and they might introduce a performance standard that says you will never wait more than 5 minutes for your haircut to start. How would they achieve that? Well, one way might be to specifically enforce a 15-minute gap between each customer coming in and leaving. typically hairdressers will put one straight after the other to get as many in the day as possible, maximise income, but it doesn't always work that way. If one overruns for some reason, then every subsequent customer is going to be waiting. That's an unhappy customer. Some won't wait, some might leave, some might still go ahead, but then, you know, complain on social media or to their friends about how slow it was. So a way to get around in that the performance standard might be to implement a 15-minute gap, so that even if it overruns by 15 minutes, the next appointment can still start on time. And the service standard, which would be the bit that they advertise to the customers, would simply say you or your appointment will start within 5 minutes of the designated time, or, for example, the haircut's on us. And that's what I would call a service standard. And you would create those for every single item on the list. Some performance and service standards might deal with 2 or 3 items on the list, but every single item on the list would have an accompanying performance or service standard, or performance and service standard, to tell the customer what you're going to do to get around that idea and what service levels there are to do it. And that's obviously going to be crucial as well for your staff, because they're the ones that are going to have to make all these things work. So they would have a performance service standard that they will be able to relate to and implement in the business. And then once you've got all that ready, you measure how well they work in terms of eliminating the gain. Because you might have an idea that says this is going to eliminate waiting times, and you might find that actually waiting times aren't quite as quicker as you thought they might be. And the reason you would do that is because you want, before you go live with all these ideas and start doing steps 4 to 7, you really want to make sure that you've got a great idea that's going to solve the problems. You want to make sure that these gains do get created. You want to make sure that the pains do get eliminated. Otherwise, it's not going to look great if you go out into the real world and tell customers about it and you still aren't achieving what you thought. So measure the effectiveness and try these things, test them, put them into dummy mode if you can, and just make sure that they're going to work as far as possible. Sometimes you have to go out in the real world and just do them and see how they crack on. If you want to see some great examples of service standards, there's some really good businesses out there that have these, and big businesses as well, but the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Group have a great service standard. Now you can just look that up on Google and it will tell you everything that they promise customers, and it's duplicated for all their staff. So every single member of staff, including the room cleaners, have a £100 budget for every single customer to basically solve any problems. So if somebody complains to a cleaner of the room that something wasn't quite right, that cleaner is immediately empowered to maybe give them a £50 or £100 discount or gift. They don't have to go to anybody further up the team chain to do that. They know what the service standards are. They've been given empowerment to enforce those service standards, and the standards are high. You'll be able to read that if you get it online. So once we got that, so we've got our list of things that we're going to do. We've got a fairly good idea that they're going to achieve what we hope they are going to achieve. So step 4 is really to start creating guarantees, so that when you promise certain levels of service or certain gain creators or pain eliminators to customers, they need to know that you seriously believe that that's what you're going to do, because it's quite easy to promise things, and if they never happen, then we're still back to being like every other customer, every other business that doesn't deliver on its promises. So we need to put some guarantees in place, and guarantees is a big subject. We've done some whole live seminars on these, and again, if you want more information, I'll be happy to send you stuff later. But broadly, you want to guarantee that certain things will happen. So in the hairdressing example, I mentioned that they might guarantee that if you're waiting longer than 5 minutes after your appointment time, that the haircut will be on us. You don't have to pay. That's a guarantee, and the customer will know that you're fairly serious about that 5-minute service standard, because you wouldn't want to give haircuts away for free every time. So when they read that in your website, or when they come in and just have a chat, they know that that's likely to be real and will happen, rather than just a promise thrown out there without any real attempt to actually deliver on it. It's also safe to say that the guarantees must be awesome and relevant to the steps you've created in steps 1 and 2. Weak guarantees actually might even have a negative effect. And when we look at guarantees with businesses, there is a slight desire by businesses to not make the guarantee too powerful, because they might see themselves losing money. So if they were a hairdresser, they might say, well, we can't really give them a free haircut if we don't see them within 5 minutes, because that could mean we lose a lot of money. And my answer would be, well, you need systems to make sure that you are never late delivering the appointment. That way you never have to actually trigger the guarantee. It's really a marketing message. So you need to be sure that you can start every appointment within 5 minutes. Otherwise, don't launch the guarantee yet. You haven't solved the problem. You haven't eliminated the pain. So don't look at the negative side of guarantees. It's the positive side that works. And if you just say, we'll pay for your haircut if you don't get seen within 5 minutes, and then you list 10 exemptions to that guarantee, 10 things that might cause you not to do it, again, that weakens it so much that it also almost becomes worthless. I've seen some guarantees on, for example, chocolate bars where it says complete satisfaction guarantee, which is brilliant, but the downside is it then says you have to post that off to an address somewhere up the country, and then they will get back to you later on. Well, for a 40p chocolate bar, nobody's going to go to the trouble of getting an envelope, getting some stamps, posting it in a letterbox, and then waiting weeks to find out the answer. So that almost becomes worthless, and to some extent even worse than not having a guarantee at all. So it must have a bit at the end that says, or we will. Again, you might see some guarantees on the websites you've looked on at Google where it says, we guarantee customer service, we guarantee perfect delivery. But if it doesn't say, or we will, then there's no real accountability. There's nothing that they have to then do as a penalty, in which case it's very easy to say. If the penalty's as strong as we don't see you within 5 minutes, we'll pay for the haircut, then that is really putting your money where your mouth is. So, I say it is a big subject, but I'll give you a couple of ideas on what you might want to include in guarantees, but really where it's going to come from is the list in steps 1 and 2. So complete satisfaction, I think any guarantee that says complete satisfaction or else is great, and there's some really good businesses that do that. It scares a lot of business owners, but my argument is if you're not prepared to give complete satisfaction, then there are things that need to be looked at in the business. And it's obviously complete satisfaction, or we will do this. Arrive on time. So for a lot of tradesmen, one of the biggest complaints about plumbers, electricians, without tarring them all with the same brush, is that they say they're going to turn up at a time, and then it can be anything 40 minutes either side, and that really annoys people. Finishing on time. So if you've got a particular project or somebody wants something doing, then finishing on time can be just as important as arriving on time. It may be that somebody wants something doing on their house before they can move in. Well, it's crucial that that's finished on time. If they're buying a house, they'd want all the mortgage work to be finished on time. So the mortgage broker ought to be guaranteeing finishing within a certain deadline. Could be saving you this much money. Accountants particularly could do that. Independent utility reviewers can do that. So it may just be saving you money, or it could just be simply the way in which you work, the way in which the product works, the way in which the service is delivered. It can be any number of things, but they've got to be linked to step 1 and 2, the list you did at the very beginning. I mentioned earlier that there needs to be a degree of awesome guarantee. And if we go back to wedding photographers who I suggested you look at their websites, I suspect that unless you're very lucky, you won't have seen any wedding photographers' websites with anything other than some very nice glossy pictures of fantastic weddings and a little bit of information about how great they are, and maybe even some qualifications, possibly some testimonials, which would be good. But I suspect none of them will particularly have anything that guarantees things. Now, if you were a wedding photographer and you did the exercise in step 1, which is what are the pains, well, clearly there can be lots of pains with wedding photographers, more so than possibly gains. And the pains will be, you know, worst scenario, don't turn up. Worst scenario, that the photos are rubbish and the bride and bridegroom or parents don't like it, etc., etc. So a complete satisfaction guarantee from a wedding photographer is on the screen, and I'll just go through it, but you'll see that this is way, way above where any normal business would consider a guarantee to stop. And I would suggest that this is the sort of level you want to be shooting for. And there is, I can't remember the name, but there is a wedding photographer who does do this guarantee, and they make an absolute mint. So their guarantee says many, many things, but included in it, it says complete satisfaction with your wedding photographs, or I will rebook the church at a suitable date for all those who attended, rehire all the wedding dresses or get them dry cleaned if they're your own, pay for all the guest travel costs to get back to that church, and effectively reshoot the whole event with all the original attendees. Or if you're completely dissatisfied with the work, they will actually pay for another photographer to do the reset up event as well. Now, there aren't going to be many businesses, let alone wedding photographers, giving that sort of detailed guarantee. And the knee-jerk reaction is possibly going to be, well, if I did that, it would just bankrupt the business. But clearly, it's looking at it from the wrong point of view. The point of view is you would make absolutely sure that you would never have to deliver on your guarantee. What this is a sales tool to eliminate or prove to the customer, potential customer, that all their pains will be eliminated, because they know you're not going to offer these sort of things and then deliver shoddy photos. You know, you'd be foolish to do that. So the aim is to make absolutely sure that that isn't going to happen, but it gives the customers, potential customers, when you're quoting, complete reassurance. And clearly that would allow the wedding photographer to get loads more customers than his competitor, and I suggest charge a fair bit more in the process. And as I say, you wouldn't do this without knowing that you're never going to deliver. And how would you do that? Well, you'd bring in some safety measures. So you'd basically go through a preview of all the photos live with a 5-minute break sometime during the wedding day, so that you can then do it or redo anything that need doing on the day, rather than going through this complete guarantee. But the aim is the customer goes away at the end of the wedding with everything they wanted and no pains from the wedding photographer. And the service standards for a wedding photographer could include a few other bits, but it might be sensible for them to say that they're going to visit the venue on 2 occasions in advance, possibly once when the rehearsal for the wedding's done. And I say church, I know it may not be a church these days, but the wedding photographer might say, well, I'll actually attend the rehearsal so that I can actually get an idea of what's going to happen, look at where I'm going to take photographs from, look at what the scenery is, and see if I can get some great ideas for what we're going to do. And I'll probably go again on another occasion when you're not there and just look around and just get everything planned. So that's going to give the customer a fair degree of assurance that this is a serious photographer who's going to basically do the business, rather than just turn up on the day because he's too busy doing lots of other wedding photographs and basically just be a last-minute bodge job. He might have 2 meetings with the customer in advance or more, and during those meetings he would discuss the particular requirements and ideas that the bride and bridegroom have, and along with that the different price levels that might go with it. So again, the customer's going to get an idea that this is going to be something that they're going to very much be involved with. It's going to be thought through. Nothing's going to be left to chance. And in another meeting, the wedding photographer might go into great detail about all the logistics, and he'll have a very specific typed laminated timetable of exactly how he's going to be working within the framework of the wedding, so that you know exactly what's going on, where he's going to be at any time. There might be, you know, even contact details, etc. So complete over-the-top service standards, and he might promise a 5-minute review of photos on the day, just so that he can get feedback and at the same time also avoid the guarantee being triggered. So that might seem extreme for a wedding photographer, but I do strongly recommend that that's the level of awesomeness that you want to be aiming for. Other things that the photographer could then do is he might offer a 24-hour hotline in the week up to the event. So basically, as things get more stressed for the wedding, he's available to have a chat at any time of the day about any problems or issues that you might want to catch up with. He might promise digital storage of the photographs for up to 50 years, so that if anything is needed, duplicates or whatever, or things go missing, he's going to have a secure storage of that for generations. He might give some guidance on how to keep safe storage of the photo album. I'm not sure if anybody keeps them in physical format these days, but if there is a nice wedding album with all the photos in, he might give a guide on how that can be kept so that it doesn't get damp or whatever, or start to look a bit jaded. He might even keep a duplicate copy of all of that in case of damage or loss. So if there is a nice physical album with all the photos in, he will keep a duplicate copy so that if it does get lost in the move of house or damaged for some reason, he will just be able to produce a duplicate copy, no problem. And he might also then give discount for family and future anniversaries, etc. So that's just a small list. I would expect the eventual list to be a lot bigger than that, but you can start to get an idea of exactly what could be there. There can be other things in there. You can easily come up with a list of 50 more things. Might even be able to do discounts on getting remarried later on if you want to be cynical. With all those things we discussed so far, there's a few things just to be aware of that I've come across when dealing with businesses in those areas, is not to have a knee-jerk reaction that just goes, yeah, but that's going to cost me a load of money, yeah, but that's going to take a load of time. This is going to cost some money and it is going to take time, but it's absolutely worth it in terms of the results you get by being so far ahead of your competition. And the other thing to be aware of is not going far enough, is coming up with too weak or too bland ideas. It's very easy for your competition to copy what you do if it's weak and bland, but if you're doing the things that the wedding photographer was doing as a guarantee, there are very few people brave enough to copy that. Step 6 is basically, once you've got all that done from step 1 to 5, all of that should be included in every bit of marketing you do, and obviously by marketing I very much mean the website as well. So you refer to that in every bit of marketing you do, in all your quotations, in every bit of marketing material and brochures, because it is very, very powerful. You don't want your website and your brochures to be telling them what you do. You want to be telling them how you do it and what they're going to get out of it. A couple of bits of research if you want to look at some businesses that have done especially well. Paddy Lund, as I say, is the dentist that I talked about. He has had some books. I'm not sure they're still in print, but you'll be able to find loads of stuff on the internet about him. Fascinating story, as well as some brilliant ideas of how to run a dentist that is just, it almost isn't a dentist really, because it's so far ahead of what you would consider a normal dentist to be. Zappos, which is an online was originally an online shoe retailer. It basically did what Amazon do, but really just with shoes in the States when they first started, and everybody told them that there's no way people are going to buy shoes online because they'd like to try them on, they'd like to look at different sizes and different measurements and different colours. So Zappos just said you can have as many sizes, as many different measurements and as many colours as you want, all delivered. You just keep the ones you want and send the rest back post-free. So that was the pain, or one of the pains, that they eliminated, and their customer service standards were absolutely brilliant, and I think they eventually did sell out to Amazon for a huge amount of money. But great story, Zappos, and clearly one of the best ones in terms of customer service, many of which you won't be aware that they do, but Walt Disney, Disneyland in particular, have some great customer service ideas. Almost since day one, they built a whole underground system so that nobody in Disneyland would actually see real workers and real people destroying the image of what was above ground. So everybody who wanted to take stuff in for repairs did it all underground without any customers seeing what was going on. They steam clean the parks every night so that all the chewing gum's taken away and it's completely pristine clean for the next morning. Very few businesses would consider doing that, just because of time and cost, if nothing else. And that's a quote from the Disney World Handbook, we have a belief that our guests will only receive the kind of treatment we want them to receive if the cast members receive that same kind of treatment from their managers. And that's just an indication that all of these things have to basically start from the ground up within your team. It has to be bought into by everybody, not just the business leader. Step 7 is, once you've done all those things, is I would then strongly suggest that you go back and review your pricing strategy, because if you are the type of business that does what Disneyland do, if you're the type of dentist who does what Paddy Lund does, if you're the type of wedding photographer that does what the example wedding photographer does, you certainly don't want to be the cheapest in town as well. You don't want to be the best and the cheapest. That's ridiculous. So you ought to be reviewing your pricing strategy so that you are more expensive than your competition, because you're actually not in competition anymore. You're out there on your own and you'll be able to charge higher prices. It is difficult to know exactly how to do that and how to structure it, and we have, as I say, got a seminar coming up next month on pricing that I strongly recommend you go to. But review pricing strategy, because you now are doing some fantastic things, and review and improve all of steps 1 to 6, because it will need tweaking. Things that you thought you could do may not quite work. You'll have to go back and revisit them. Some of your team may not be quite buying into it all. So you always have to review and improve everything, as with everything in business. So those are the 7 steps. I hope you found that useful. Clearly, there's an awful amount of work following on from that, but it's a gradual process. But I think the main thing is to get the mindset right in terms of believing that you can be far better than your competition, not have to compete on price all the time, not have to be one of 50 quoting, and you might get the work, you might not. It's a great feeling to know that you're one of the best of whatever it is you do in the town, city or country, and that's the aim, I think. And once you've done that, the next stage would probably be to be some sort of niche business where you specialise in the areas that you're brilliant at, and that can then make even more money, and we'll talk about that on another occasion. So I appreciate you attending today. Hope you've got some use out of it. I hope you've got a long, detailed action plan to crack on with things. If you want to know anything about future events, if you have any questions about today's webinar, how to do stuff, any guidance or further help, always happy to do that. And if you want details of a workshop we do where we spend half a day with your team going through all of those ideas in a lot more detail and differentiating your business, we can send you details of how you get your hands on that. There's some email addresses there. Either will do, wendy@marklawson.co.uk or myself, mark@marklawson.co.uk. And just to let you know the future events that are coming up, as I say, there's a live seminar at Future in Plymouth, 20th of April, and that's on pricing ideas to supercharge profits. It is the single easiest way to make loads more money, so if you can get to that, strongly recommend you do. If you know anybody else that ought to go along, they can go free as your guest. Just let us know and we'll get them invited as well. And the next webinar is in 2 months' time, and that's going to be about important numbers in the business and how to understand them, what to do with them, and that's going to be on 18th of May 2017. So good luck in implementing all this, and hope to see you either at the live event or at the next webinar sometime in the future. Thank you.